You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctors In podcast, and this is episode 150. We were just talking about this off air. It's unbelievable to think that we've put 150 episodes out.
Yoo-hoo!
It's one of those things that it sounds like a ton, really, when you think back. And, we put one a week out. So you think of how long we've been doing this for. We've enjoyed doing every episode. We have fun doing it. You and I get to talk a ton off air, and then we come on and try to boil down everything we've talked about into 20 to 30 minutes. But we've enjoyed doing them. So 150 episodes later.
Yeah, we get a lot of feedback, right? People seem to appreciate the topics and just the way we try and break it down for people. And anyway, we like the feedback.
Yeah, I know. It's
very positive.
It's funny because one time not long ago, I was actually in a store shopping with my son, and we were actually picking up some tennis rackets, and somebody heard my voice, and they recognized it just from the podcast. So my son was trying to say that we were famous, and I was like, well, no, it's just we have a definite face for radio, right? We're better off hidden behind
the voices.
We got the voices, but we're better hidden behind a microphone. But anyways, we want to thank many of you who've listened to a lot of our podcasts for joining us along this journey. So we do thank you for that very much. Today, what we want to do is talk about a couple of things. There's been a few interesting studies that have come out really over the last couple of weeks that we want to kind of talk about. And then we want to spend some time talking about eyes, people's eyes. And we got some interesting theories on what's going on with people's eyes today, and the connection it has to the brain. So we'll talk about that as well. But first, the study came out, because we get this question asked a lot in emails. Basically, people take a low-dose aspirin every day, and they've been doing it for a long time, and they want to know, is this something that I should be doing, or, is this something that's I shouldn't be doing? And we get that question a fair amount, probably emailed into our office every week. Probably somebody's asking us that question. But a new study came out on that recently.
Well, at the end of the day, the study was saying that the risk of taking aspirin every day really outweigh the benefits. Really, I mean, that was the headline of the study, that the benefits of taking a low-dose aspirin, a lot of patients do, especially older people. They sort of bought this many, many years ago. Think about it. I've been in practice for 44, and this is my 45th year. And it was very, very common in the 70s, 80s, 90s for people to get on a low-dose aspirin. It was almost like a vitamin to people, because Bayer did a good job, right? You got to give them credit, because and still today they advertise this. It's still on, if you watch American TV or whatever, and aspirin is still out there advertising that keep an aspirin around, because if you're having a heart attack or a stroke, you want to get to an aspirin as fast as you can. And you know what? I'm not against that. As a matter of fact, if you think you're having a stroke, not a bad idea. Is somebody around you, if you can't do it, or somebody around you giving you an aspirin, I got no problem with that temporarily. But what they're showing that long-term, the benefits of aspirin long-term are not good. And the risk of aspirin, taking it on a daily basis, is those risks are real. And I've always said that, by the way, and I'm just going to say it because it's true. And if you look up studies that were done with our Navitol, you see what aspirin does is it thins out, it decreases platelet aggregation, right? So your platelets are in your blood to clot your blood. And of course, you don't want to overclot, because you can get...
Yeah, it just backs things up like a hair in a drain, right?
Exactly.
It blocks it up.
And it can, makes you more susceptible to...
As you mentioned, there have been a fair amount of studies on pine bark extract versus aspirin in a lot of studies. Yeah. And pine bark extract works very, very well as a safe, natural alternative to aspirin. And, of course, that's why you mentioned Navitol, because our pine bark extract.
Yeah, and then if you look at what those studies show, too, is that aspirin, one of its side effects is hearing loss and tinnitus, right? Well, one of the things you take Navitol for, pine bark extract, is for tinnitus, right? Because it shows to be quite effective.
Yeah, a lot of people get a lot of benefits when it comes to tinnitus with.
So you still get the idea that it can help in platelet aggregation, but at the end of the day, you get all the benefits of taking Navitol, which is, I mean, for years and years and years, thousands of our patients have been taking Navitol day in and day out, and they feel better with it. It's so good cardiovascular.
It's interesting because there has been some studies done on pine bark extract and hearing loss and even balance, right? There's a lot of people that suffer from benign positional vertigo. Now, our take on that is usually this caused by two reasons. One is their neck, right? I mean, we've seen that so many times as well. They got an issue with their neck, and it's affecting their balance. And the second cause has to do with high circulating insulin that's affecting the blood flow and everything. But yeah, there are studies showing the effect that pine bark has on hearing loss, on tinnitus, and on balance issues. So it is one of those things. And as you mentioned, there is a fair amount of side effects to taking a low dose aspirin every day. Like you've mentioned, hearing loss. The funny thing about hearing loss is it doesn't happen overnight unless you made a habit of going to rock concerts, or you think of all the people that come back from Vietnam that were in Vietnam that have all these hearing loss issues. But for the most part, hearing loss is one of those things that's just slow, and it's very hard to attribute to something. Yeah. All of a sudden, it
takes years, right?
Yeah, and they don't hear as well, and it's like they're never going to associate that with the daily aspirin they've been taking. I mean, it's such a tough association to make, so people don't make it, but they've lost their hearing as a result of it, because that is a known side effect to taking a daily aspirin. And as you mentioned, there's a few other ones. I mean, for some people, again, they get these terrible gastric ulcers, right? Some people they get,
and they come out of nowhere, right? And again, that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time.
No, it takes a long time.
Oftentimes, until it can be actually fatal. You don't even know you're bleeding. You're micro bleeding, right? The ulcer's bleeding, and you're losing blood, but you don't know it because it's all internal. You're not seeing it. And, I mean, can be really dangerous. Now, I know that doesn't happen with everybody.
No, and it's
obviously with aspirin, but...
And it's the same thing with digestive disorders. Low-dose aspirin can be a trigger that leads down the road to Crohn's disease for some people, right? That's one of the known... autoimmune stuff. And then even a lot of people end up with an H. pylori infection.
Again.
And it's hard, again, because it's generally that people don't tie those things together. But if you take a daily aspirin, again, it's one of those things you just have to be aware of it. And there are some stuff on the natural side that you can do as well. If you are taking a low-dose aspirin every day, you should definitely be taking probiotics.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a whole bunch of other
things.
They're
not really a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory aspirin, but it doesn't matter. It's still a drug, right? Like, people associated that. Like I said, if you look back and you go back to the generation of the people that were baby boomers or whatever, they caught on to this. Taking aspirin every day was almost like a vitamin. I mean, it was almost like they did
the same kind of thing with statin drugs, right?
Yeah.
I remember one of the early book on nutrition. This one guy was talking about taking statin every day like it's a vitamin. And now you see all the side effects that people are having. It definitely ain't a vitamin, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with an aspirin. It's just kind of take a low dose every day, and there you go, you're fine. But there are side effects to doing that, and it can't be discounted. And a lot of times there are things that you would never associate with taking a low dose.
I was at
aspirin.
a conference years ago, and just to tell you about the first time I heard about pine bark and platelet aggregation, and how the first guy that ever did it, I remember he was, I'd say he was a real friend, but it was amazing. I think I went to 10 conferences in a row because I had talked about pine bark and chronic fatigue syndrome, and I actually wrote a book about it. And so I got invited to do a multitude of seminars. And it seems to me that every seminar I was at, I was with this Dr. Ronald Watson, and he was doing seminars on the comparison of aspirin and pine bark extract. He had done studies at the University of either Utah or somewhere. He was from there, so I just can't remember what university exactly. But anyway, it doesn't matter. This is years ago. But again, just that always got reinforced because I used to hear him say, why would you not take pine bark if you get the same benefits and then you don't get the side effects? And plus, you get the other benefits of Pine Bark, so good for the cardiovascular system, right?
Yeah, which is going to lead us into our next kind of topic, which has to do with the eyes. We get a lot of questions with about eye health, and there was a study that came out not long ago that once again kind of reinforced the link between eye disease and dementia and Alzheimer's, right? There seems to be a much higher risk of having memory issues, Alzheimer's, dementia, if you have stuff like glaucoma or age-related macular degeneration or any of those issues. So it's interesting because you and I kind of always say that the skin is a reflection of the gut. If the skin isn't healthy, the gut isn't healthy. Yeah. Whether they think it's healthy or not, it doesn't matter. The gut's definitely not healthy. And the eyes are, a lot of ways, a reflection of what's going on inside the brain. A lot of times, because this very same things that can affect the eyes will affect the brain, but the brain is more resilient because they got larger blood vessels. One of the problems with the eyes, there are so many little tiny micro blood vessels behind the eye. That's
little capillaries.
And that's the thing. So those little things can get plugged or break down a lot easier, which is why, one of the problems with diabetics, for example, is diabetes retinopathy of the eye. They have all these eye issues. So the eyes are a good window into what's going on inside the person's brain. Yeah. So what this study found is there's a link. Well, we know that there's a link between the eyes and the brain, but they were always kind of like trying to figure out what that link was. And, you and I could have said this a long time ago, but it has to do with insulin and blood sugar. And now they're starting to see that there is that link between eye health, elevated sugars and brain health, because the very same thing, like we said earlier, one of the big side effects of diabetes affects their eyes, but diabetes also affects the brain, and we know that, right?
And you always say this too, right? Like the body is 100% committed to taking sugar out of the bloodstream, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that quickly in case somebody has not heard that before. But because
so tightly regulated,
because glucose is so toxic to our bodies in a lot of ways, and we need so little of it to function. I mean, you don't need any real. I mean, the amount of glucose in your bloodstream at any given time is like a quarter of a teaspoon. It's not much. So you think about that. You don't need a lot of glucose in our blood to function properly. It is so toxic that our body is always trying to maintain our blood sugar levels normal. And obesity, in a lot of ways, not always, but it's a way of our body protecting itself from having abnormal blood sugar levels. And some people have the amazing ability to take sugar out of their blood and store it in fat cells to not get diabetes, and then get other people who are thin and have type 2 diabetes because their body just doesn't have the ability to store fat. Yeah. And they end up with diabetes very quickly, right? But the body will take it and it will do whatever it can not to become diabetic. So it will ruin your eyes. It will ruin your brain. It will ruin your circulation. It will hurt your heart. It'll do everything it can first before you become a person that has elevated blood sugar levels, because then, the body it's so toxic for the body. And that's really, what's really going on. And so what we're starting to see now is a lot of these things that we never associated with type 2 diabetes, we're starting to associate with, such as type 3 diabetes of the brain, Alzheimer's, dementia, and heart, blood pressure, all those kind of things, right?
Look at blood pressure, right? It's a major issue. I read an article the other day just about, you just don't want to have elevated blood pressure, right? It's just not good for you. But what causes it, right? Like they always talked about the culprit is salt. Keep salt out of your food, when it was always crappy carbohydrates and insulin, right?
Just like the people blamed butter for what the bread was doing. Yeah. People were blaming salt for what the foods that salt were on.
The potato chips.
And that's the thing, right? It was really that combination that is the problem. And there are really two reasons why people have elevated blood pressure today. As a rule of thumb, not all. I mean,
just about
80-20 rule, right? You can cover 80% of the people that have high blood pressure by two things. One, which is high circulating insulin, will absolutely cause inflammation, will cause increased pressure in your blood vessels, which is high blood pressure. So one of the early symptoms that people have of high circulating insulin is they got elevated blood pressure. So a lot of people, that's why when they lower their insulin, their blood pressure gets back to normal pretty quickly. So that's one way. And, of course, the second way is, and I'm telling you, the more you read about the dangerous effects of elevated cortisol in the body, it's unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. I was telling you over lunch of an interesting study where people with IBS, right? Because one of the problems, and we're going to talk about this in an upcoming video that we have probably in the next week coming out, but we talk about one of the problems with IBS is the effect that cortisol has on their gut as well. But it's interesting. They did a study where they had all these people with IBS do public speaking and non-IBS people having public speaking. What they found was under any stress at all, people with IBS secrete more cortisol.
Yeah.
Because, again, it makes sense, right? Because IBS is a stress to the system, so cortisol will be elevated anyways. But anyways, when it comes to blood pressure, cortisol, I mean, if you think about the mechanism, it makes sense, right? Because cortisol, one of the main functions of cortisol is to raise your blood sugar levels. So you're constantly raising your blood sugar levels. You're constantly lowering with insulin. It's just like a trigger effect that's going on. So sometimes it could be the food that we're eating that's elevating insulin. Other times it could be the stress or cortisol that's elevating insulin as well. Yeah. But anyways, blood pressure, as you mentioned, is a good indication that they got insulin issue for sure, and they may also have a cortisol issue as well. So yeah. it is interesting when you think about it.
Well, you think of what cortisol does, right? It's the long-lasting fight or flight, right? Just put your body into something that, you don't sleep properly, your cortisol goes up, and then again, that can affect your blood pressure. It can affect a lot of things. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's kind of a double whammy because if you have high circulating insulin, you're going to have high blood pressure, and that's going to damage your blood vessels. And again, those little blood vessels behind the eye get affected. I mean, those little tiny micro blood vessels just get hammered when it comes to high blood pressure. And then also, again, high circulating insulin causes inflammation, and inflammation causes stuff to stick in blood vessels. It affects the endothelium, which is the lining of the blood vessels. It swells them up, right? It causes those to grow.
Yeah, they're not as slippery.
No, and insulin's a growth hormone, so it makes things grow. And one of the things it can make grow is it can mess up that endothelium, that inner lining of your blood vessels, and it just takes away space. Less blood can flow through. It'll increase your blood pressure even more, increases your risk of stroke and all those kind of things.
Sickness without a fever, right? Inflammation, right?
Yeah, and that's really what's going on. Inflammation is an indication that we say this all the time, inflammation isn't Houdini. It's not a magician. It doesn't just magically, spontaneously appear. There's always a cause of inflammation. And, people forever have said inflammation is the root of all disease, and it's not. Inflammation is in all disease, but what's causing that inflammation? It doesn't just spontaneously show up. So when it comes to eyes, right, so if we reverse engineer a majority of the eye problems that people have with aging, right, glaucoma or, like I said, age-related macular degeneration, all these things.
Diabetic retinopathy.
If you were to reverse engineer a lot of those things, they start off with some blood flow issues to the eye. But what's causing those blood flow issues to the eye? And most of the people, it's high circulating insulin that's causing the change of blood flow, which is causing a problem in the eye. There's no question. So, again, a lot of things that can fix insulin can also help your eyes out. No question. And it's funny, again, because you mentioned pine bark earlier, how many people message us and tell us how much they've improved their eye health by taking pine bark extract. And again, pine bark extract is very good for promoting increased blood flow. So it only makes sense that the eyes would benefit from that. I mean, the eyes definitely benefit from improved blood flow, right? So, I mean, it's one of those things that if you're worried about your eyes or if you're having eye issues, you better be worried about your brain as well, because you've increased your risk of having brain problems. And eyes can be an early indication that that's going to be a problem down the future. But the good thing is, the very same thing that you would do to protect your brain in a lot of ways are the same things that you would do to help improve your eye health.
Yeah.
So you want to definitely, again, take that into consideration. Our eyes are not in a vacuum. They're not independent of other things. Because of the way that the blood goes into the eye, it could be a good indication that there's some serious problems happening behind the scenes in even bigger blood vessels. And so you want to definitely pay attention to the health of your eyes. We always say pay attention to the health of your skin, pay attention to the health of your eyes, and pay attention to the health of your hair.
Yeah.
Because it's also hair is a great biomarker, right? If all of a sudden, we hear this a lot with hormone stuff, women all of a sudden they're like, man, I'm just losing hair. Okay, there's something going on. Hair doesn't just all of a sudden for no reason start to fall in clumps or get thinner or get coarse or all those things. Okay, that's a biomarker. There's something going on. Same thing with skin. All of a sudden, somebody's skin doesn't look as healthy as it used to. That's an indication of something going on in the gut.
Yeah.
Eyes are definitely an indication that, and what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about vision, just you got bad vision. I'm talking about like macular degeneration. I'm talking about glaucoma, those kind of things. That's an indication that there's something going on, and you better start paying attention to the health of your brain as well. Right? Is there anything else you want to add on that?
No, I think that's we covered it.
Naturally, to protect your eyes, we love pine bark extract. Absolutely love pine bark extract.
And the dry eyes, too. Think about that, because that's a big thing now with all the blue light. People live and, make their living on a computer, your iPad, and just the blue light, right? And that really, I believe that really has an effect, too, on that. So to protect your eyes from that, I love the high DHA oil. Omega-3 is tremendous for eyes. Navitol, again, is very, very good. I can't know if I said this on a podcast or not, but the last time I went to my optometrist, he told me that my eyes were better now than they were 10 years ago. I actually improved. And again, that's keeping insulin down. That is, trying to practice what we preach here as much as you can. Navitol, I take high doses DHA, and think of all the microcirculation behind the eyes. And my eyes are better. My eyes are better now than they ever have been. Well, at least for 10 years, right? I need glasses to read, but my distant vision is better. And I know that. I find that I don't need my glasses. I'm so used to wearing them. I wear them all the time, but I don't need them unless I'm reading. Like I've got to use them for reading, right? So at 66 years old, like the guy said, man, your eyes are in good shape and they're better than they used to be.
And that's something
I try and
that
take
we
care
hear
of
a lot,
them, right?
We do get a lot of messages along the lines like, hey, the stuff that I'm taking, can that help with my eyes? Because my optometrist says my eyes are doing better. Yeah, absolutely. But again, eyes are a window into what's going on, right? And it's
good eating and
a window into circulation and a whole bunch of stuff. So that's encouraging, because we get a lot of questions about the eyes. And again, what you just mentioned is exactly our philosophy on anti-aging, right? Anti-aging is internal. The external skin and hair and everything will reflect what's going on internally. So if your insides are healthy, if your mitochondria are healthy, right? If you're all those kind of things, then it's going to be reflected on the outside appearance. So eyes are one of those things as well. All right, so we're out of time, but we want to thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. Also, if you're not a newsletter subscriber, head over to our website, martinclinic.com, and sign up for our newsletters. Also, we have a private Facebook group, and it's great. We get a ton of questions. We try to go in there and answer as many questions as we can. It's a tremendous community, so you can go to our website and join our private Facebook group as well. And then every Thursday morning, you do Facebook Live, and you answer a ton of questions that way as well. So there's a lot of ways to get a hold of us.
I do my rants.
Yeah, Facebook Live is a great medium for that, isn't it? It's just a great way. It is one of those things that's amazing now that a person has the ability to publish and bypass TV stations and all those kind of things to get their message out. It is neat. And it allows you to kind of get things off your chest every once in a while, because sometimes I'm glad when I'm reading these studies, because, again, we're coming off a week where the last 2 weeks there have been two bad studies, one on coconut oil.
Yeah, craziness.
Terrible study. I hate even to use the word study. And then the one on low carb will shorten lifespan, which, again, was that study's been destroyed, and it's been shown for what it is, which is a terrible study. They manipulated the data in a sense. They didn't include, basically nobody ate less than 40% carbs almost. I think it was like 37% carbs. So that's not even a low-carb diet by anybody's definition in the sense of low carb. So there's so many things wrong with that study, but it got a ton of headlines. Yeah. So there are times when I read these studies and it's like I'm kind of glad. When I used to coach hockey with the parents, we had the 24-hour rule, which is like, hey, you may not like me during the game, but you got to give it 24 hours because otherwise – everybody's going to say something stupid that they're going to regret.
Yeah, cool down.
There's a 24-hour cool down period, right? So it's kind of like the same thing. And that's the problem with social media, and a lot of people get themselves into trouble because they can instantly give a hot take all day long. And sometimes their hot take, when they think about it after, it's like, that's not really what I meant. And so we're constantly, oh, yeah, things go viral all the time because, somebody just got mad at something, jumped on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and just said something they completely regretted, right? So But yeah, that's the power of social media. But it's allowed us, and it's allowed you to directly put yourself in front of people that have health questions and the ability to answer those questions. So it's fantastic. So again, we want to thank you for listening, and have a great day.